Welcome to Roots Ruminants, your podcast for creative and innovative use of farm, pasture, and rangeland. We're going back to the basics of raising and grazing livestock, growing your own forage, and practical land use.
Here we are.
Okay, we're back, Jared.
We are.
Just you and I.
A little bit of a hiatus. Got a lot of stuff done this summer. Went a lot of places, but now we're back.
And now we get to talk about them. And we've got a good agenda. A few things that have come out recently in the news to talk about. We're going to talk about some breeding things that you have going on with the cattle project.
Hmm?
We'll probably catch up on where we are in the year of grazing pastures with cows and what that looks like to the end of the year. And then some warm season annual forage stuff I want to get on as far as things that worked and didn't work over the last couple months. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with the big news and then we're gonna, kind of leave you in suspense for the rest of it. But yesterday at Dakota Fest, Senator Rounds announced this bill's been out for about a week and a half now. But he kind of did the public release of a bill that the Grasslands Initiative has been working with a lot of other groups for a while on trying to bring to fruition. And it is really, I would describe it as a rebalancing of American agriculture and noting and recognizing that grasslands have had significantly less programs to support them over the years than Title I crops. Title I crops would be basically all the things that we raise in this country: barley, oats, wheat, corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts, for a long time, with an incredible amount of price protections, risk protections for yield, and like Charlie Munger, which would be Warren Buffett's partner and Berkshire Hathaway, always said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And I probably have alluded to this before, but we've got to the point where all of our major Title I crops are heavily dependent on exports, Cotton, 80%, sorghum, 60, 70%, depending on the year, wheat, 30%, corn, 30%, soybeans, 50 to 55%, almonds, 80%. So we've kind of producing all these things, almost all of them at a loss, right, below break-even prices, to supply cheap commodities to the world. And then something shifted about 5 years ago, which was we're no longer able to keep up with beef consumption in this country. And today we're importing 15 to 20 on the net. This is accounting for net imports and net exports. We are 15 to 20% shy of what our domestic consumption is in beef production. And if you look at consumption models and production models in beef production, we could be closer to 30 to 35% in 5 years. So we've really, and we don't need to talk about lamb, like we talked about that before. We're now 74% of lamb consumed in this country is reliant on imports. And so the outcome has been that we have traded this production mechanism by which we export vast amounts of things below cost of production at the taxpayer's expense for the tens of billions of dollars a year that's used to prop up that system. And we've exchanged that for a deficit in red meat at the same time that we put red meat at the top of the food pyramid as not only, consumer preferences, but also dietary preferences for health. All those things have kind of converged to say we probably need some kind of a broad scale mechanism in which we can rebuild the U.S. herds and flocks.
How you just laid that out is probably the best explanation of what I've ever heard as far as the nation's outlook of what we've done with our cropping system and why it's fairly broken with how we've subsidized crops and why we are where we are with cow numbers in America right now. So it also, you take a look at declining cow herd numbers coupled with what CRP was and how it's not quite working. Don't you think that kind of has something to do with why the Ranch Act is going to come into play too?
Yeah. So in 1985 when CRP was passed, they knew they had an oversupply issue on primary grains, but there was also an oversupply issue on beef too, right? This is the dairy buyout days of the same farm bill, same time coming out. And so you have a surplus of meat in the market. you really couldn't try to grow that beef cow herd in 1985 10 to 20% and not have further depressed prices, which kind of maintained all the way through the 90s, early 2000s, until consumer patterns actually changed, is when we really started to start with Atkins diet, and then now into carnivore, pseudo-carnivore, and just overall recognition that red meat is probably the best food. Went from like the worst food you can eat to now being, widely recognized as maybe the best food. So you couldn't do the 25 to 30 million acres of CRP in 1985 and throw that into beef production, because you would further depress those prices as well. And so it became basically a green version of a set-aside program, a green box WTO activity, World Trade Organization activity, because it was done for conservation, when we all pretty much know that it was a supply side fix in the mid 1980s to get out of the farm crisis. We've talked a lot about working lands conservation. A lot of programs have come a long way. CRP is one that hasn't. And so there is some good work out there trying to be done on CRP Reform Act and things like that, that might take, some of those remaining CRP acres and move them into usable pastures. But the reality is we only have about 16 to 17 million acres of what we would call regular, continuous, and general CRP still under contract. And a lot of that is in continuous, which is dedicated small plots, right? So pivot corners, tree strips, grass waterways, field borders, prairie strips, things like that. Those don't, make for great grazing opportunities because they're super small. Like the average, Iowa's like number 3 or number 4 in the country as far as CRP acreage. The average CRP contract in Iowa is 7 acres. So they're all really small. So the whole program wasn't really designed to create, a forage program. And that's kind of where it failed. So even if we open that back up, for the most part, those acres are owned and managed by the wrong demographic. They're owned by people that don't have cows. Not many people that have cows put a lot of acres into CRP. They are in places that fencing and watering and grazing systems were never designed. And so they don't really make that, even if we get some flexibility in those acres, it doesn't really make it that attractive to grow herds and flocks. The Ranch Act is you might call it CRP like, but it's not under CRP. It's a Title I program. It's moving these grassland acres into like the Title I commodity program. And I would say basically, to try to put your head around it, if you're familiar with these other programs, it is eligibility and payment structure similar to general CRP, with grazing allocation and restrictions similar to grassland CRP or CRP grasslands, which is essentially not prohibitive. There's no dates. You can graze year round. You basically just can't overgraze those acres. So the idea would be is that in the Ranch Act, up to 20 million acres of marginal farmland would be allowed to go back into the system with the intended explicit purpose of use for grazing.
And the eligibility is
similar to general CRP. There has to be cropping history of the last 4 to 6 years. Expiring CRP contracts would qualify for that. So if you're expiring out of general, you would be able to qualify for that because CRP maintains your crop history, even though it's in grasslands. And it's also an exit strategy for a lot of those general CRP acres, some of which are now like celebrating their 30th and 40th anniversaries. There's land in places like Baca County, Colorado, that have been in CRP for 3 or 4 year, 10-year cycles that at this point really need to transition into grasslands.
Be managed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's super exciting because I think there's been a lot of talk about how we're going to expand the cow herd, and understanding that if you want to expand a grazing livestock species, cattle and sheep and bison and others, you're going to have to create habitat. So you think of it more of like a wildlife species. Like, okay, if you want to see more of X wildlife species, you go ahead and you plant habitat for them. And this is kind of using the same mechanism by which we've improved a lot of habitat and populations of wildlife. But we need to do that for our domestic herds and flocks too.
Yeah. It can do both, and it should do both. And it does both better than individually, if that makes sense. I think thinking back to just these tired out, long-term CRP fields. Boy, there's not a lot of life left on those. The diversity is lacking because they haven't been managed or harder to manage. And through grazing and a correct grazing plan, they are going to thrive better. So I mean, wildlife enthusiasts, I think they love CRP and they think habitat for pheasants and deer. And I think pollinator lovers love CRP because there's been such a big push for more pollinator habitat within CRP plantings.
Yep.
However, I just think grazing only enhances that when grazing's done correctly.
Right. So, and I
it's
think
a
we've come a
win-win.
long way in the conservation community as well, and a lot of those
Yeah.
groups recognizing that right now the main emphasis for increased grassland acres is in the past it might have been wildlife species, or it might have been songbirds, or it might have been pollinators, and all those things come with. But really, the tip of the spear right now is this essentially crisis that we're in, that we're no longer self-sufficient. I mean, like AJ Munger was doing some interviews down at Dakota Fest yesterday, and it's like the country that like invented being a cowboy, right, is now outsourcing cowboying activities to other parts of the world to feed our own people, while we are focusing resources on making sure that there's a cheap and abundant supply of Chinese hog feed. Like, that's probably a little bit abrasive way to say it, and I don't want to get into an inter-commodity battle between agriculture, but I don't think that at this point, after we're in 7 of the last 8 years looking for some kind of arbitrary, non-legislative bailout for Title I crops, either for production or for prices, that we can say that the system has served us very well, or served rural communities very well.
Yeah.
So, in a broad scale, I'd say it's the best attempt, the largest scale attempt that I've seen, that will actually try to rebalance what maybe has gotten out of whack.
How many acres will this open up?
20 million acres.
20 million acres. And I know, reading through some of that, like, what is the estimated amount of cows supported by 20 million acres that could potentially go in?
Well, so it's going to be opened up nationwide, and county rental rates will reflect that. So it's hard to tell where it happens. Now, if it happens in Montana, New Mexico, that's going to be much lower than if it happens in Iowa and Missouri. But if you look at on the average stocking rate of about 4 acres a pair, which might sound pretty high to our Western viewers, but if you're in Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, where you're looking with proper rotation at 1.5 to 2 acres a pair for summer grazing on cows, we're going to estimate that somewhere between 4 to 5 million 4 to 5 million head of cattle.
Million cows. Yeah.
That would get us to, at today's pace, self-sufficiency just on imported meat, not on imported feeder calves and fed keep coming from Mexico and Canada. That's the gap between doing it ourselves and relying on frozen shipments coming.
What does that look like if we add 2 to 4 million head of cows?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like as the nation's cow herd size comparably over the last 5 to 10 years? Where does that put us?
It's a good question, but it probably gets us back to like 12-year ago levels.
Okay.
Probably like 2008 type levels would be my guess. We go up from like.
Sometimes I think selfishly, like, well, hey, like, prices are really good. Let's just keep it the way it is. Let's not try to grow this anymore, and it'll be all right, right? Because it'll be better for me. But we're also still growing. Like, our country is not shrinking. Our per capita consumption is not shrinking. So, like, if you believe this trend is true, which you probably should, we're just going to need more cows.
Yeah. Well, and I don't in any way think that the beef industry will ever go the way of the lamb industry, but under that same pretext, being constantly dependent on exports and being, having such a gap in self-sufficiency in lamb should have led to a 50-year consistent, steady, profitable lamb prices, and did not. Because what happens is, and what the story the whole summer has been, is that as the herd size shrinks, so does our infrastructure and so does our emphasis, right? And so if we're not actually trying to build capacity in packing, processing, distribution, and things like that, that is always going to shrink just ahead of this opportunity. Like, the idea that prices will be high forever because we have a shortage is a pretty big fallacy, because the infrastructure will right size itself as it shrinks. And then as those things close, they get mothballed, they're not coming back. And so there really isn't much in the trajectory that says we're going to see meaningful cow herd expansion without some sort of, intervention that allows for opportunity. And Justin, you and I see that, we see it in our listeners, we see it when we go out and speak, when we talk to people. We have a window that's best I've ever seen, with hungry, aggressive young people that really want to run cows, and looking for a place to do it and a home to do it. And so that's awesome. But if we wait 10 years, we might not have that. That momentum might be gone. That enthusiasm might be gone. That energy and willingness might be
Yeah,
gone.
that's true.
So
Yep.
I think it's awesome. I, you know, could castigate this as more of a, re-homesteading act to some degree, right? And look back, hopefully, upon its completion and say that there's thousands and tens of thousands of people that now say that was the opportunity our operation needed at that time to create and build something that we're super proud of, that built our rural community, that supported our family. So
Yeah, that's
anyway,
bold. I love it. So let's go through
yeah,
some scenarios then. Like,
sure.
how do we use it? How does it pay? How do you see a variety of folks trying to use the program?
Yeah, so 75% of county rental rate, annual payment, cost share for seeding, seedbed prep, similar to kind of how CRP does it. Big difference and change in moving this out of the CRP program is that now it's legislated, or will put in eligibility for EQIP, CSP, RCPP type funding for fence, water, and infrastructure. Right now, you can't double up on those programs. If you're in CRP, you can't use the EQIP. Even grassland CRP, that's probably the most prohibitive thing, is if you go into grassland CRP, you're not eligible for EQIP contracts on those acres for grazing management, for water, for fence. You kind of need to do that prior to even thinking about getting into grassland CRP. Make sure you're set for 10 to 15 years when you get in. Moving it out of CRP makes it so that we don't have to worry about that doubling up. And so you can still access those programs for the other needs that you might have in establishment, but they're not funded in this directly. From a budget scoring standpoint, that's really key, because the reason the CRP Flexibility Act hasn't gone anywhere, which is pretty common sense to most anybody that's looked at the issue, is because the Office of Budget Management has scored that so incredibly expensive, because they're thinking, what if every CRP contract in the country applied for fence and water? What if that 3-acre pollinator habitat in Northeast Iowa wanted to have fences around it and a well drug to put water to it? So the score is off the charts. It'll actually make it probably look more expensive than this program. But those funds are actually pretty decent right now, so just allowing that access to them is probably pretty key. Scenarios where you think about it, if you're thinking about getting in or expanding the cow herd right now, you one have to increase your access to pasture and habitat, and then you also have to come in and look at potentially kind of a higher price for bred stock to start out to begin with. This would allow some certainty that making that decision to move into a pasture-based system on a portion of your acres is at least going to be able to, cover baseline costs and needs for a longer period of time, and get you out of, like, essentially maybe from one cycle to the next. So you're not in a 3 to 5 year program. You're not in a short-term program that's going to put you in the wrong side of the market, and you're going to lose access to your pasture because your program is over. So
Sure.
long-term and consistency behind the 10 to 15 year contracts, I think, is pretty key. If you're thinking about it, and how we've looked at marginal land, we basically have made it so that the producer decides what the marginal land is. One of the bad things about how general CRP went about it is there's this perverse incentive to put your most productive land in, because there's a productivity factor that goes into the rental rate, right? So if you take the most productive piece on a property that you have, and by their definition, you would get the highest CRP payment. If you took the lowest CRP payment, the lowest productivity piece of land you have, you would get a much, much lower annual payment. And so you kind of have, and I think some people do it both ways. Some people look at it and say, it's my most marginal land, that's where I should do with it anyway, and so I'll take a lower payment. Other people are saying, man, that payment is 50, 70% higher on this piece over here than it is on that piece. I'm going to take the higher payment, put the most productive stuff in.
So that would be kind of leveling the playing field to let producers decide which of their properties make the most sense for them to engage in at a flat rate. Yeah.
So I've got a piece of cropland.
Yep.
I want to increase my cows. It's marginal land. What? Okay, we kind of talked through it vaguely. Marginal means what?
Marginal means you decide. If you've got 6
That is
different
it.
fields that you're looking at putting in, and they're all in the same county, they all would be eligible for the same
Okay.
payment throughout the county. So you decide, right? And you would,
Yep.
make
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to Also utilize rented ground. I was talking through that with Mitch Peterson, right? So maybe you've got a landlord who maybe they don't want their land farmed anymore, or you want to run cows on it. You don't want to farm it. You could propose to them that they sign it up through this program.
Yeah.
They're going to get 75% of the county average for rental payment, and you could still offer them the remaining 25% of the normal average rental payment. So they'd still be getting the same amount of dollars per acre of a normal rented cash crop field.
Yeah.
But you get to run cows.
Right. Family relationships too, like, right. So you've got someone on a fixed income. If you're paying kind of family rent, you're maybe in that same range as far as rental payments anyway. We've talked a lot with folks from the East actually that are pretty excited about this, and Iowa specifically. We've had good dialogue with cattlemen in the state of Iowa that are, looking at this and saying, what's the opportunity going to be for our next generation of young people? Like for years, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was feed a few cattle and some sheep on, utilize your grain that way. Then it turned into commercial hog barns in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And now that industry has gotten so stale and the rental rates so stagnant as building costs have come up and interest that it doesn't look that very attractive either. And so if you looked at 80 to 100 acres of Iowa farm ground, low, wet stuff that's problematic, steep hillsides, like just the stuff that is really on the edge for productivity anyway. Going back to pasture and running 40 cows, the gross revenue from 40 cows is greater at these calf prices is greater than the gross revenue from a 2,400 head hog finisher. And yet a 2,400 head hog finisher is going to cost close to $1 million to put up and maintain. And then you have electricity, you have labor, you have propane, you have all the other maintenance and things like that to maintain that infrastructure. So literally an 80-acre piece with 40 cows on it, rotated properly, is a legitimately better pathway to generate, that supplemental revenue for a modest-sized Iowa, Minnesota farm than what your parents would have done a generation before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, those things are like 15 to 18 years out on a payoff because of interest rates and building costs. So like 15 to 18 years of basically, no payment for labor to manage a site for quite a long time. Someone may come on here and disagree and say it's better than that, but from what I've seen, rental rates and costs and everything, I don't think that's far off.
Yeah, things just shifted. It wasn't very long ago. I mean, probably less than 10 years ago, where that was kind of the model.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you needed an additional farm enterprise to supplement what you have and get some money on, that was an easy button. Worked for a lot of folks. But
yeah,
it probably still worked. It worked great for them too. 15-year loan and things got paid off and it worked good. But
yeah,
things are just a little different now.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't also in my mind going to lead to a market crash either, because in the interim 3 to 5 years that it would take to implement this stuff, get stocked, restock, add replacement heifers and stuff, you're actually pulling heifers out of the feed yard. You're probably prolonging the bull market longer than it arbitrarily would have during an expansion phase. And then like it would be a good problem to have for our industry to actually grow, because I just don't think you can look at a model of a business like in a livestock species and look at lamb to say that prolonged deficits in production lead to profitability, because it certainly hasn't been the case. You get the same volatile swings in the same cycle, whether you're importing it or producing it domestically.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think there's a ton of great applications opportunity. 20 million acres sounds like a lot. Honestly, that's about 5 to 6% of total annual cropland. So that's not a very big percentage number either, 5 to 6%. We're already planting record numbers of corn and soybeans combined acres this year. Probably going to beat that record again next year, because I don't see cotton and wheat coming back in a big way. So it's probably time to reposition some acres towards grass.
Yep. Very good.
Anyway, we'll have more discussion on this soon. So either Senator Rounds or one of his staffers is going to hopefully join us in the next week or so, if we can get it scheduled. And then we'll kind of get their perspective on it, as well as the authors of the bill, and what they see the needs and opportunities could be from the program.
Heck yeah. It's exciting. Some more to come on that. All right. So moving past the big news of the Ranch Act
Yeah.
and getting to things that are happening here right now, right? Like trailing off at the end of August here, and we've kind of worked through a grazing season, and bulls have probably been in for 40, 45 days in most cases. I want to talk to you about one of the projects you had going on right now, or earlier, I guess, the breeding season, with breeding some of your cows and setting them up to also take some embryos.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I've had this, kind of desire to do this, to experiment with this for a really long time. And so now that I'm on the farm full time, it is a great opportunity to do so. So it's funny because it's like we kind of breed late anyway. So on our AI schedule, once we get it done with everybody else's, then it's our turn to put in seeders and breed and stuff. And it gets a little exhausting. Like everybody, the crew, me, it's all like middle of July. You're like, oh, can we just kind of be done? Like we've been AI since April. Like, are we really going to do more? Yes, we are, because and then this year we're going to go one step farther and run them through the chute one more time, So it's always been like, I've thought about doing in years past. I'm like, not quite set up for it, but I got a cabin barn that's built, that's getting ready to go. And it's like, time to do this is now. Since my Transova days, I've always been like enamored with this idea of advanced reproductive technologies is used to try to maximize a commercial cow herd. But there's so much cost involved in it that it's like, yeah, I just kind of have to lead a lot of those cool technologies to the feedstock guys. But there was some research that I found that was done back in the 90s at Ohio State on double implanting embryos to get to basically do a forced twinning in a cow. And there's a couple different ways you can get a cow to have more twins. One, you can do what Meat Animal Research Center did in Clay Center, Nebraska, and that is to breed and keep only calves that came out of twins for several generations. And they built what they would call a twinning herd. I think that herd was dispersed decades ago, right? I remember talking about it when we were in college, but I think it's been long ago dispersed. They got those twinners. I haven't looked up for a while, but it was like 20 to 25%, twins is what they got those cows to, which is great, but very mixed feelings on what twins look like in a commercial cow herd, right? I don't want twins out of heifers. I don't want twins out of a 10-year-old cow. I don't want twins in the last 3 weeks of calving. Twins are fine when you know they're coming and you have a plan for them and you can, treat them separately, but otherwise you don't. Then there's this, okay, so they're, going to have twins. Breed back's not great because they've been fed the same as those fairing singles. And if they, produce milk for those, they're in a pen in a situation where everybody else are at a disadvantage because everybody else is raising a single, raising the twins. Well, Justin, from decades of practical management in a sheep flock, how do you get past that?
Bump their nutrition.
You sort them. Yeah. I got my singles, I got my twins, I got my triplets, and they get managed differently. I don't need to feed the singles as hard as I need the triplets all the way through gestation, right? Like you manage around it. And then you're prepared for that kind of stuff when you're jug lambing and everything. And so the same considerations would be needed if you're doing that. So back to the other ways of being twins. You can give low levels of FSH at the right time frame, which will cause them to naturally double ovulate. The problem is cows have, anybody that's running like a donor herd knows that cows are incredibly variable in how they respond to FSH, right? If you give, 80% of a bottle of FSH, a faltropin to a cow or a heifer, you could have anywhere from 2 to 3 oocytes, like barely response, to like 30, 40. And then you actually start low on that cow and then figure out where she dials in at, how much she needs. You'd have the same variability if you tried to do it commercially, trying to give just a few cc's or a cc or half cc of FSH. Yeah, you're going to have some that have twins. You're going to have some that might fertilize quadruplets and then, lose all their embryos and regress because you so it's just really variable to try to do, follicular stimulating hormone at the right time because you don't know how those cows should be dosed or even how they're going to respond. So that's a non-viable option to make more twins. So then you're back to okay, well, you could breed for 7 generations, single trait select, and have a group of cows that do nothing right except have twins, but they're going to have twins when they're heifers. They're going to have twins when they're old. They're going to have twins the last calf of the season, things that I don't want. Or you could take that into your management considerations and actually plan for it. So what we did, I was going to initially, I thought was I'm going to double implant embryos, right? And the research that was done that back in the 90s showed that about 30% of those, optimally will then carry twins. The embryo implant and the embryo cost is going to be the most expensive long term in this project. So then I'm going, and all I'm really looking to do is produce a surplus amount of commercial feeder calves. So like, why wouldn't I just AI them, use their own oocyte, to make a single, and then put another embryo in? So I'm not double implanting embryos, but I'm putting an embryo in a cow that I time bred AI 7 days later. So I'm doing both. I'm timed AIing to a singular bull to same sire, and then I'm putting embryos in. Those embryos have multiple, different sires, different cow matings, everything like that. So that won't be as consistent. Embryos cost a lot of money to make, right? $300-$400 an embryo isn't out of line, especially if you drop a donor cow off at a facility to make an ET and in vivo kind of embryo. In vivo embryos, despite what everybody says, firmly believe still have higher conception rates than in vitro embryos. And I'm looking for maximum breed up, so I wanted to use regular ET embryos. But I know a lot of people that have a lot of embryos in the tank that are 10, 15, 20 years old, like perfectly viable, just outdated genetics, never got put into a recip, found out something about this, the bull came back to a different parentage, or the cow did after this, or just things that come up that like, that mating didn't work out very well. I made like 80 embryos out of this mating, and then I put 20, and they just didn't work the way I wanted to. So I've got 50, 60 left. So I went to a few people and said, hey, like to use some embryos. And if anything turns out, it's going to be out of season for you. They're going to be Aprils. They're not going to work for spring bull sale, but you can come through and look at everything in the summer, and whatever you want, you can have for X amount over market price, but you don't have to take anything either. So it'll give you a chance to at least see the genetic expression of the embryos that are made. If you want anything, whether it's twin or single derived, but if you don't want anything, you don't have to. And I'll not register them. I won't keep back for bulls. I won't, try to, any way compete with you with your genetics. So found several people that were like, yeah, that's better than what I'm going to do, because at some point I'm just going to check them on the ground.
Turn and throw them. Yep.
My brother came in, did the embryos, so we're pretty low cost. So at this point, because everybody's kind of, fun and fine doing a little research project, basically have zero extra costs over my time bred AI that we did out of one of our own bulls we collected. So, and we'll see. So the hope would be we're collecting all kinds of data. Well, all right. So then again, back to that, like, I don't want twins out of heifers. I don't want twins out of second calvers, right? I want twins out of my larger framed, heavier milking, like the kind of cows that almost have so much milk that like one calf isn't enough. Like, I'm going to have bag problems just because the calf's going to get on two teats and never get to the other back two, or the, that one side or whatever it is that's actually going to get much for the cow. 4 to 9-year-old, 4 to 8-year-old cows that are larger framed. So a small subset of our herd. So we only did 35 head just in this little trial deal. I would surmise that best case scenario, 40 to 50% of any cow herd at any given time would be a candidate, right? Right size, right age, right, early enough in the calving season to be able to make this all work right. And then, like my target goal would be, I would call it a great success if we end up with, 30% of those implanted that would actually carry twins.
Mm-hmm. Which would be awesome.
Yeah, well, and then also they're synchronized, right? And they're at the front of the calving season.
Yep.
So I'm gonna
so you know what's coming when they're coming.
I know when it's coming. I know they're going to have twins. I know I need to check. I know that there's very likelihood that I'm going to have malpresentation. I'm going to have a backwards calf. I'm going to have, a tail first situation, like all those things that happen with twins. But instead of discovering that at 6 a.m. on my, pasture checks in May and April, I'm going to have those, ultrasounded confirmed. I'll feed them separately, feed them a little better, just a notch above during gestation. I don't creep feed, haven't crepe fed for 10 years. Anything that I get to rear as twins, 100% going to creep feed those calves. The goal would be to say, can we get those twins to look almost and fit in with at least the middle cut of the herd when we're selling those calves in January, right? Can they, not in the dink pen, probably twin reared calves aren't going to be in the top cut of steers, but if they can make the middle cut, I'll be pretty happy.
So as you were talking about putting your embryos into bigger, heavier milking cows, it made me think, how come if you are a seed stock producer, could you just buy open Holstein dairy cows and stick 2 embryos in them and then actually have them raise both calves? and use
Yeah,
those
well,
recips? They could raise two, right?
100%. Yeah, a lot of people buy nurse cows to raise 3 or 4, right? You know, I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
And bringing disease into an isolated environment is the biggest reason not to bring a dairy cow into your
Yeah, I
beef farm.
suppose.
Neonates,
Yeah.
leukosis, anaplasma, all that kind of stuff. That's the biggest downside to it. But yeah, there's some people that buy nurse cows and have them raise 3 or 4 calves.
Yeah.
They milk
Yep.
like crazy. And I don't, and someone said, well, this is just going to be a dairy technology. It's like, I don't, the way that most dairies are run, fine tuning that dry period, I don't see him wanting to mess with that. I don't see him wanting to, delay postpartum, breed back. Maybe on a cow that's on her last lactation, you might take a chance on that.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems less likely that they're going to want to, engage in it in mass because the way they manage those cows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, it's a fun project. My daughter's going to use it for an agri-science project for FFA. It's going to make a really cool data set. We're going to keep tweaking on it. So now that I'm telling everybody about it, I'll, when we get to the fall here, I'll 100% ultrasound, go through results, good, bad, or ugly. I'm not waiting until I get good results to tell you that I'm doing an experiment. If it doesn't work, I'll tell you it doesn't work. And if it's a
Yeah.
wreck, I'll tell you if it's a wreck.
Yeah. I mean, in this scenario, you're not on anything, so
No,
you got to do it. It's fun.
fun to try.
Yeah, that's gonna be the if that's not champion agri-science project for FFA for your daughter, I don't know what's
I
gonna
don't
be
want
it.
to set the bar too
That's
high,
pretty
but
cool.
it
That's
is
pretty
probably
cool.
more complicated than some. Yeah.
Yep. It's good stuff.
Anyway, that's our little fun project for the summer. By fun project, I mean running the cows through for an extra 4 hours on a hot August, a hot July day, when we're all wanting to be done with this anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was different. Like it was even like from normal embryo projects and stuff. Like my brother doing it, I was like, you don't need to be picky on these CLs, right? Like normally, like you really look for the strength of the corpus luteum when you're putting embryos in, and you want to make sure you have a strong CL, right? Or you're not going to try it. It's like,
Okay.
no, we're putting if there's you don't have to worry about that. I don't need a CL score on these. Like if it has one, we're putting an embryo in. If it doesn't have one, we're not. Like period. Like just in and out. Like speed up that process a little bit. And yeah, we put embryos in 34 out of 35. And if that was a normal research
Okay.
group, probably would have kicked out at least 10% more for weak CLs. If we
Okay.
put a $300 embryo in, we probably would have been a little bit pickier. But
Right. Yep.
yeah. So we'll see. And then we get all kinds of like fun data after that. Like what's the breed back on those twin calves? Like what are on the cows, right? The cows that did that, did they fall out of the herd in 1 to 2 years because we set them back far enough? Did it not affect them much? Could they possibly do it the second time around, do 2 years in a row? Or is it like, no, they're going to have to go 1 year in the herd, and if they do twin, they're going to have to take a year off to recover, to get back into it and track all those kind of things? Because if the twin, a cow rearing twins is set back far enough, and I can't get her to recover with very simple and cheap, kind of methods like extra tubs or extra grass or lower stocking rates, then it limits my opportunity to do this on more in the future.
Yeah. It would not take a lot of dollars per cow to, I mean, I shouldn't say it wouldn't. That's a minimal expense for the value of the calf right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like 10 extra calves is 25 grand. We get them to weaning, like, and not a lot of resources to get them there. I'm most curious on what percent if I calve those cows with the second cycle heifers, and I've got individual pens, and I jug them up for 2 to 4 days. I don't know what the number is. It's at least 48 hours. On what percent I can get to rear twins. That like, hopefully, I have more confidence that they'll be able to get twins with the reproductive methods. I'm more curious on, is that number 40% or is it 80% that I can get to actually rear twins by providing that separations?
Gosh, if you do that, I don't know why it couldn't be close to 100%. Of a mature cow that you're
I
going to
think
actually
so.
pen up.
Yeah, because it smells right. Most of what happens is you have to get through the period where for a while the calves don't move and the cow's just going to stay there with both calves. And then there's a couple day period where the calf moves and the cow follows the calf, right? The cow takes care of the calf because the calf's moving, but it's not really following the cow very well. And then it shifts
Mm-hmm.
to the calves follow the cow. Okay.
And that's usually when you lose them, right? It's somewhere between 12 and 36 hours when I've tried to let them, kind of keep them on pasture. That's usually when you lose them. You usually, they'll take twins, they'll get colostrum, and then it's 12 hours later that now all of a sudden you got a calf that's left behind.
Yeah, there's some confusion. Sure.
But it's not mostly because the cow moves one calf away. I think it's a lot of time the calf just starts to wander off. The cow does her job and follows one, and then it just doesn't work to bring the other calf back to the other.
Yep.
Maybe not. Maybe they just decide 12 to 48 hours that they don't want to have two. I don't know. But we
I've heard
have
of
several sets every year that we leave on to raise twins.
Yeah. I mean, you'll even see that with ewes lambing on pasture, especially in range areas. And I've heard of folks like hobbling legs just so that they're tied together and they're not, you don't get one walking off. Just you have less loss that way.
Yeah, those same mothers that are in Western flocks that'll, have a, whatever the drop is, but end up with 110, 120% weaned, will move into, an Eastern jug lamb situation and wean off 160, 180. Same genetics, same mothers, just different management.
Yeah. A lot more management, but if you've got the management, it's worth the dollars right now.
Yeah. So anyway, more to come when I get results.
Heck yeah.
We'll announce them here. Yeah.
No, I think just the last piece that we kind of alluded to talking about today was just the state of where we're at with pastures and forages, and I think we're ending the corn season for a lot of folks. Corn is kind of made, and so silage is being chopped. In southeast South Dakota now, and obviously central South Dakota dry areas too. But the corn's finishing, silage is going to be chopped, and now we're kind of a lot of talk about coming back with rye, triticale, winter forages, things like that. And we're kind of coming up on how to manage these warm season annual forages.
Yeah.
So like millet hay has kind of matured. Some of that stuff that was planted in the month of June, that's been taken off now. Sorghum Sudan grass has a head on it, and people are thinking about chopping that or mowing that and haying that. So kind of this end of this, or I don't know, change of a season again.
Yep. Oh, so the biggest thing that we had producers switch to around here, we got to catch up with a lot of them. We actually had our Dakota Vision Egg open house last week. It was a good crowd. We had like 225 people there. It was fun, tons of kids, fun to catch up with a lot of people. The biggest shift we probably made to some people was people that had been using millet for a lot of years, looking for one big millet crop, headed out, like, get a ton of bales, but also like, can we do anything that's got a little better quality? We've had several producers switch to, okay, why don't we go to the photoperiod sensitive sorghum sedans? Why don't we move to that and then just cut it early, right? Don't wait till it's maximum forage potential. Just get it, between waist and chest high, depending on how tall you are. And then cut it. And then if it gets rain, just cut it again, just like keep ahead of it to manage that like amount of stuff you're trying to put into a dry bale. And that worked really well this year. The guys that move that way are very, I think,
and it's really big, long leaves on those plants. So quality is pretty good too. Like it's not just a lot of stalk, it's a lot of leaf. And so digestibility is pretty decent, probably similar to a millet hay, but not as much as like a sorghum Sudan grass, or not as poor quality as a sorghum Sudan.
Or even on the millet. So just setting it early. Just like when you get the window, when you get the temperatures, you never quite know on the rainfall, but like when the temperatures get up where you're actually going to dry the stuff out, just cut it. Don't worry about it if it's not headed out yet. Like just go take what you want and plant Japanese and things like that to be able to like get a regrowth that happens. And I think that's the biggest thing is we just move people into harvesting those forages a little bit earlier to get more quality. Because and we're in a rainfall pattern right here where we're actually not too bad, where grass hay and alfalfa hay was pretty decent, so they can focus more on quality and not just mass and tonnage. But it's been better management on trying to get it into a bale. I know that by taking that's the biggest thing. Otherwise, we've got tons of stuff going on at the airplane the next few weeks. We've got like all kinds of stuff. I mean, our area here has moved into cover crops as forage and alternative forages have really become mainstream in a decade. or so, we moved where it was interesting to now it's almost so common. It's surprising when you don't see a cover crop planted into oat stubble. It's surprising you when you don't see someone drilling something into salad ground within it after cutting. So it's kind of fun.
Maximizing production, just like twinning cows.
Yeah. That one's a little more work.
Yeah.
Jumping in the drill for a couple hours is not as big a commitment as.
Or hiring the airplane or the drone to do it.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, we're perfect timing for that. End of August here. These winter annuals can go in. I mean, it seems like typically people would almost wait till September, and we almost miss some growing opportunity. But it seems like if we're going into corn, you got to have that seed sitting out there earlier rather than later. Give as many opportunities as possible for that field to catch rain and get those seeds to go. So get them in early. It's going to have a lot of shade here for the next 3 weeks, probably, where corn is good, and then it'll start to open up. And when those seeds need the sunlight, they're going to start to get it there. And so, get them out there now. Yeah.
Don't ever worry about trying to wait for the soil moisture to come back to plant a cover crop. Like, just plant it and let the rain hit it when it, that's it's just a different paradigm than planting a primary crop where you have massive issues. If you plant corn into a field where 50% of it has subsoil moisture and it's going to germinate, 50% doesn't, you have a problem, because now you have 2 crops in the same field that need to be managed as one when the combine rolls through. With cover crop, it doesn't matter. If half of it comes up early and the other half comes up a month later, like, it's okay. Anyway, well, fair's coming up too. We will try to get something scheduled with Senator's staff or Senator, I guess, as soon as it happens.
Yep, it's good stuff. Glad we got to talk through it too today, but we'll have more to come on that too. So
I want to be clear, like, the Ranch Act is just being proposed. It's not passed. It's not a thing. It's not a program.
Yep.
Don't go to the FSA office and ask for it. At this point, if you're part of any groups that, and local groups like county, state, cattlemen's, soil health organizations, and you want to put your name as a supporter on this to try and drum up more interest, it is going to be a not easy, not quick process to get legislative bodies and the government on board with this is the right thing to do. So a lot of work to be done there yet. So if you have questions and if you want to be a part of the push here, let us know. Let me know. I'll get you in touch with the right people that can help with the right information and material. Senator Rounds and Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, Senator Rounds from South Dakota, are the 2 leads on the bill, and they're actively looking for co-sponsors and supporters to get this off the ground. So a lot of work to do.
Good stuff. Yeah. Yep. But the right steps. Perfect. Well, always great to visit, catch up. Appreciate everybody to listen, and stay tuned. Another couple weeks, we'll have another episode of Roots and Ruminants. Thanks for listening.
Well, we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Roots and Ruminants podcast. Let us know what you thought of it. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those social media things. And, if you ever have any questions, just give us a call. We've got a toll-free number here at 888-498-7333. Be glad to hear from you. Thank you.